Welcome everyone to another segment of Chief Speaks on Enlightenment and Transformation, as well as Enlightenment and Transformation TV from YouTube, Enlightenment and Transformation on Blog Talk Radio, and I know many of you tune in from iTunes and various other podcast platforms across the internet. But I want to welcome you all who are listening live in this moment, and especially those of you who tune in later from the archives. Welcome to Chief Speaks, and as many of you know, this is our segment where I share a little bit of information about a lot of things, which hopefully helps to round out some of the studies that many of you are already engaged in and have already initiated yourselves into or been initiated into as students. So as many of you know, we follow a theme every month, and this month's theme has been unity, and we've done 2 segments thus far dealing with the concept of unity. And last month's segment we dealt with freedom and liberation, right? Freedom and liberation. But in unity, we've been able to cover, I think, some ground that really speaks to maybe some of the misconceptions and myths pertaining to what unity is and, of course, what unity isn't. And I wanted to speak in this segment somewhat about the value of unity, somewhat about, just why it's important for us to unify. I know often we use the terminology, we have to be united, we got to unite or die. I mean, these are common slogans that you'll see pasted amongst billboards and even along picket lines. But one of the things that sometimes we don't really look into is, why is it necessary to unify? Or is it even necessary? I was listening to this Thursday's community show that our sister Kim hosts, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 to 3 Eastern. And, it's a live call-in show, which is cool, And she was speaking about, she and a few other people were speaking about sometimes the participatory spirit that lives inside of people who engage information such as what we all present with Anu, from Sister Felicia to Brother Zach to Sister Kim to myself to the end of the month student panel. And there's been some other videos I've found here and there online where people have spoken about some of the Anu calculations. And even now that I'm playing a little bit with social media, with the Instagram and stuff, I've been finding like pictures of my books and people quoting things out of the books and stuff like that. So there are people sharing the information and trying to help individuals that they know in their circles with things that have helped them. But one of the things that she had spoken about was the lack of participation sometimes when, participation is called for. People tend to observe a bit more. They like to sit back and be served for the most part. And, of course, I've known that. I've experienced that throughout the years, not just on internet platforms, but even just within the community, servicing and doing different works and doing different events. You typically have a lot of people who will hug the wall before they'll jump in to actually contribute or participate. And, that's just kind of the numbers you play with. Like, I tell a lot of people, even if you're throwing an event, for instance, if you invite 100 people, expect 10 people to come. So that's kind of you got to work with those 1 to 10 ratios, when you're doing this type of work, because it's really a work that for some reason people feel they should observe more than they should actually participate. So that's neither here nor there. But I just thought it was interesting that she would bring that up. And we're discussing concepts of unity in this month. And the reason I say that is because unity to achieve unity, it requires participation. It requires people to actually do their part. Unity does not come just through, or solidarity through declaration. It doesn't even come through people doing the same thing, through conformity. And we've covered some of these things this month. But it really comes through diversified units working towards a common outcome or a common goal. Now, if you think about it from a we'll say a magical perspective, right? That's basically what the premise of ceremonial or collective or group rituals or group magic is. You have a bunch of different individuals, and you may have them doing the exact same rituals, but the truth is, when we're doing a ritual, there's an action aspect of it where we're just going through the steps and we're performing whatever's being prescribed or whatever's being told to us. And then there's a synthesis that goes on inside, a synthesis and an analysis. And it's a subjective synthesis that goes inside of the actual ritualist, that goes on inside of the ritualist. So if I say, okay, take some sage and take an eagle feather and wave that sage into the air in a certain direction and say words over it, each individual who's participating in that ritual is going to have a different question. First of all, the entire premise and reason that they're participating inside of that ritual is going to be different for each one, because each one has a different question. One may have just the question, why do we use eagle feathers as opposed to hawk feathers, as opposed to vulture feathers, as opposed to ostrich feathers? Then another person may say, well, why are we using sage? Why don't we use cedar? Why don't we use tobacco? Why don't we use frankincense and myrrh? Why don't we burn this type of herb or that type of herb? So the questions may be different for why we come into the process. And some may say, and it could be the outcome, but let's say we all want the same outcome. Let's say we're all doing this ritual because it's a part of a funerary rite, and we want the individual who may have just transitioned to transition into their next phase, into their next lifetime, smoothly, coolly, and peacefully. So in that instance, we are all working towards the same outcome, but the subjective synthesis and the questioning and analysis that goes on inside of each member who's ritualizing is different. But ironically and interesting enough, we can all end up with the same results. So it's like many other acts. You could punch. I remember years ago, I got into a situation many years ago, and there's a friend of mine who was a professional boxer at the time, and I was cutting his hair, and we used to spar together years ago, and he went on to the pros, and he saw I was cutting his hair, but luckily I'm ambidextrous, so I was able to cut. I can cut with either one, but so I had one hand wrapped up, and he was saying, what happened? And I said, I got into a little scuffle, and I said, I punched someone wrong, so I hurt my hand. And he said, what happened? I explained to him what happened, which ended up me knocking the individual unconscious when I hit him. And he said, well, it sounds like you hit him right to me. So yeah, maybe you didn't hold your wrist properly, or maybe from at the time being in the gym so much and wearing wraps, which actually weakens your wrist. I know a lot of times when we're fighting and stuff and we're hitting the heavy bag, and my students, I don't have them wear wraps, but back then, my actual trainer would have me wrap up for my own protection, to protect my wrists and hands. But in fact, what happens, this happens to all professional fighters, when they get into fights in the streets, they always break their hands every time. Mike Tyson used to speak about that. Every time I'm in a street fight, I break my hand. Why? Because you have that support of the wraps all the time. So just a side note, anyone training or whatever, learn to hit that heavy bag without the wraps. So but the point is, he was saying, you achieved your desired outcome. You wanted to hurt this individual, you hurt him. You knocked him out. You were able to walk away from the situation, get back home. You were safe, blah, blah, blah. So there's so many different ways to accomplish something, but you'll notice if the intent is the same amongst the ritualists, or the intent is the same amongst the participants, we will all end up in the same place. This is why it's so important for us not to condemn individuals who choose different paths of enlightenment than we do. It's a very sophomoric and childish viewpoint to kind of profess and to condemn individuals because they have not chosen one path of ascension. That really doesn't make sense. For you to think that you could learn everything from one source is very childish. You know, of course, a child would think like that because they're used to the tutelage and the guidance and the protection of their parents. But even a child's base nature always wants it always wants to go explore. It always wants to go into the backyard or the front yard or open cabinets or stick metal things inside of the outlet, or so many different things. It wants to explore and find things out, despite perhaps your objections and your prohibitions towards certain things. It's going to go, and sometimes the more you protest and prohibit, the more it will go into certain areas, because our base nature for all of us on the planet is the nature of the explorer. So to think that you can get everything from one source is asinine. And I'm saying that as a source, as an individual who provides information and a free service to the public in terms of these shows and some of the things at the blogs. And, you know, there's a lot, obviously, that you guys know that I give without a suggested offering. And there are some things that we suggest an offering from in order to sustain my liberty, you know, and the liberty of Anu. Because all of these things cost money, you know, the scheduling apps that I use, you know, that cost several $100s. The Vimeo video account, the pro account that we use on the website, that costs money. You know, we have some other things that we're getting ready to come out with that you'll probably see. Hopefully, if we can stay on schedule, you'll probably see like next month, I think, is our launch date. You know, but all of these things cost. You know, stuff is not free. Even the camera and the equipment I'm currently utilizing to speak to you now came with a cost. So, you know, of course, there needs to be some form of reciprocity in order to keep things living and to keep things moving. But, you know, the idea that one would use one source doesn't work. So when we speak about unity, right, and we speak about the diversity of the members of an organism, those different members of an organism all have a different subjective analysis that they can share with the greater organism. And if we look at this, and just in regards to us coming to the planet, we look at the Olodumare, right? Olodumare sections itself off. You know, when we look at the first Odu and the sacred Odu of the Olodu or the Odu Ifa, we have Eji Ogbe. Ogbe. Now, Ogbe means to become. Okay, it means the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of becoming, of being, coming into being. Very similar to our I King, our first hexagram dealing with heaven. You know, it's the becoming. You know, going into the infinite. When we look at its converse relationship, we have Oyeko, which is unbecoming, going into the void. You know, try again in a little bit. I'm sorry, my katana here. I have my tablet in front of me, and my katana is telling me something's not right. But anyway, let me mute this. So yeah, going into becoming is Ogbe, right? So we become so many different things, and we become the diversity of life in order to collect a different analysis about the process of life. Now, what becomes inevitable for all of us is that we're going to end up dying. All of us are going to go through that transformative process. You can't sidestep it. Now, how we perceive that death may be different, you know, depending on the individual. Some feel that it's just a sleep. Some feel that you're just done, you expire, you close your eyes, and that's the end. That's the end. Some feel that it's the beginning to something else. You know, reincarnation is also another theme that is prevalent. In the Yoruba system, we have partial reincarnation, where there's a portion of the soul that may come back, but then there's a portion that goes to different forms of Orun or different forms of heaven, depending on, you know, your character in this lifetime. So, but ultimately we see that there is a call to diversity. even in the becoming, we can all become different things, which allows for a different analysis. So that way, when we expire in any form, however you perceive it, and we go back to Olodumare, we go back to our source, we all come with a different analysis. We all come with a different analysis of life. If you consider life the magic and death the outcome, so life is the ritual, death is the expected outcome of the ritual. So we're all intending ourselves towards death. You know, for many of us, we have a constant preoccupation towards death, you know, and we vacillate as beings. You know, we vacillate pretty heavily, and that vacillation is necessary for movement. You know, I speak about this a little bit in the forthcoming book, The 14 African Principles, which I know was not done on the 14th. I missed it. All right, there was so much going on. Speaking of death, I have so many funeral rites I have to perform. There's a lot of people who are transitioning around me right now, and you know, the work never ends. So that's why a lot of the work sometimes get delayed, because I have there's a lot of other things going on aside from the videos and the books and things like that. So I have to wait, that's all. But in any event, so if life becomes the ritual, or life is the ritual that we engage in, life becomes the magic, and it's a push and pull magic. It's a magic of extreme dualism. You know, that's why even within ourselves, a lot of times when we're seeking to self-improve and we're seeking to grow, we find that there's a constant vacillation between self-esteem and self-disgust. We don't know which one really sometimes to be, or which one to kind of perceive ourselves as being. So we go back and forth between esteem and disgust, you know, and through that pushing of those two concepts, those two cognitions of ourselves, the truth will begin to arise. You know, now that's a ritual. Life is the ritual. Okay, death is the result. And we can have different forms of death. You know, so the perception that we go into our lives with will define what our death will look like. You know, so like I had someone ask me not long ago, what happens when we die? And my answer to that individual was, whatever you think is going to happen is going to happen when you die. And I mean that. You know, I wasn't saying that to present a riddle to the individual, but if you feel you're going to go to a paradise type heaven based on your perception of what that paradise is, and that's where you'll go. If you feel like you'll come back, you'll come back. You'll will yourself, and whether it's through your subconscious willing or your conscious willing, you'll will yourself into your next reality. Just like we do it now in life. We say the mind is everything. If you put your focus and your intention towards certain things, then those things will come to be in your life. But what happens when those things come to be in your life? Then that means your previous reality dies. So this new reality can be born. The new reality that you willed with your mental power. So what's the difference between that and what we perceive to be as the big death or the big sleep? There's no difference. So we study these things, we listen to my show, we do rituals, we work with our Orisha, we work with our Ori, we work with our Egun, so that we birth ourselves into the most divine death that we possibly can have. We understand the value, just like our ancestors did, of the great afterlife. You see? So there's great value in the ritual of today, of life. And there's great value in the diversity that we come into being when we participate in the process of life. There's great value in that. And when we come together as a collective unit, by each one performing their individual tasks, at the head, we now deliver a more diversified sense of information. So say, for instance, when we're speaking about Anu. In Anu, I'm the chief Jegna, right? So what that means is that everyone who is participating, volunteering, working, and willfully committing themselves to this particular work, when they go through the process, now they're all striving towards the same process. They want to be new people. They want to be better people. They want to be better fathers, better mothers, better children, better aunties, better uncles, better grandmothers, better grandfathers. Because I mean, I have people from a very wide range in terms of age. And as far as my male and female breakdown, I think I have my percentages are something like 53 female, 47 male, which is pretty good. I mean, that's almost 50-50. So that's really good. Most times you see movements are primarily dominated by females. But here I have a strong male presence in Anu, but we're all aiming towards the same goal, right? So as a chief Jegna, being what some would perceive to be a head, I don't perceive myself necessarily to be that, but certainly a coordinator, I begin to collect all of the information from the various diversified sources in Anu. Now, what are those diversified sources? Those are the people who are working to come into being. Those are the people who are starting that first step of the sacred Odu Eji Ogbe, to create, to be. Eji Ogbe is all light. Okay, so when you step out into the bright lights and you say, okay, now I'm going to start my process, right? Each one starts that differently, because each one pulls a different personality, a different characteristic, different set of tools based on what they need when they launch into the world. We call those your Orisha, or your patron Orisha, or your guardian Orisha. And those because those are the tools that you needed. Not because, you don't become Shango because you're so brave. A lot of times you can become Shango because you're such a coward. You don't become Oshun because you're so loving. Most of the time it's because you're unloving. You're selfish. You're manipulative. In fact, I won't get into it. I don't want anybody to feel bad. But I'll just say most of the time with my students and clients, what they perceive themselves to be in terms of the Orisha, they're the exact opposite. That they're not as evolved as those Orisha archetypes are, as they would like to claim. You gain that wisdom and you gain that character and that evolution through your actual work, through your progression forward, through your movement forward, through the archetypes and through the sacred Odu. You see, so the head becomes necessary, or the coordinator or the chief becomes necessary as the supreme synthesis of all of the different information that's coming in. And the beauty is when it's subjective, which is going to be anyway, but when it's owned, when the subjective perception is owned and it's respected, then we get such a beautiful variance of information. You see, we get such a beautiful variance. Now, through your magical work, what helps you to move beyond what we consider to be the duality or the disconnect, right? Is through your ritual. There comes a time in your ritual where you're performing a certain work and you're the one performing it and the work is being performed, and there comes a moment where those lines disappear and blur, and there's a oneness between the actual ritual being done and the person doing the ritual. In honesty and definition, that unification is magic. That's the magic. And once that process occurs, then the magic starts. Because you can't do magic before that. You cannot really do magic when you're robotically moving through the different components and aspects of your rituals. Like I said, you're not even doing magic yet. That's kind of coming into it with a real cookbook mentality, which sadly so many do. So many, they'll read a book or get a spell book, and then they'll just start doing the rituals and the steps, and they'll say, okay, now I'm doing magic. You're not doing magic yet. There hasn't been a unification of the actual components with the person delivering the components. And until that unification begins, you're just mixing things together. I think I said it recently in a show, there's a fine line between herbal tea and omiero. There's a fine line between an ibori and just getting your head washed. There's a fine line between using your hands to heal somebody and an erotic experience. What makes it the difference? It's the power that flows through the actual ritual, the ritualist. And that power that flows through the ritualist comes through a unification and a connecting with the actual ritual to the point that they're indistinguishable. They become one. You know, so it's almost like when you're doing a ritual, let's say to Eshu, for instance, you're not just doing the ritual to Eshu, you're invoking and evoking the Eshu inside of you and outside of you. So you become Eshu now doing the ritual, you know, as opposed to yourself doing the ritual to something else. You know, if you consider, again, the unification, and these are just various themes of unification, your entire being, what we consider ourselves to be as man, Memph Alpha Nun, woman, man, and child, is a unification of the various stratus of consciousness within us. You know, inside of us, there are different hierarchical stratuses of consciousness, and they're all over the place. And the task of unifying them is what creates civilized thought. Prior to that, your thought is very savage. If you say, well, I'm just going to focus on my warrior aspect, I'm just going to focus on my wizard aspect, I'm just going to focus on my thief aspect, I'm just going to focus on my priest aspect, that's what creates a savage. Because you begin to see and process the world only through one small perspective, without understanding that what creates your humanity or your deityhood is the organizing and the unification of those components. And I've only picked, you know, in our last segment we spoke about 4 core ones. There's more than that, you know, because look at all the Orisha. You have hundreds, even thousands, another show, of Orisha that all exist within you, right? Now, I know a lot of people don't agree with that. I've had people come back and say, no, they're gods and this and that. You know, God is Greek. So when you start to apply these words to ancient tradition, you need more of a qualifier and explanation than just trying to instill fear in the listener. When you say, let's say like, God will punish you, right? Or you say like, the Orisha are gods. The Orisha are spirits. The Orisha are like angels. The Orisha crown your head. You know, in this day and time, it's no longer acceptable to use these Catholic terms at this point. They're just terms of Protestant and Catholic religion. And we should no longer allow people to use these terms with us to subjugate us into a way of thinking or a culture or a way of being, because it's schizophrenic within itself. You know, no different than me going to learn an ancient African tradition and you have me using holy water or praying to saints. Now, I'm not saying those processes are wrong, but let me know that this is an infusion of something modern or an infusion of something newer. You know, don't have me thinking and confusing myself internally to think that in ancient Africa we prayed to Saint Bartholomew. That's not cool, you know. Or the holy water, I mean, that was the water that was right in front of you. That was the water in the lagoon. That was the water at the waterfall or the spring. You see? Holy was that Helios, sun, Helios. Well, where's the land of the sun? So that means all the water here is holy. You know, so it's important for us to distinguish a lot of times some of these terms, because we end up not only confusing people, but we confuse ourselves. You know, we definitely confuse ourselves more than need be. And when you're dealing with deeper or higher level spirituality, for some it can be confusing enough as it is, right? So going back just to the ideas of unification, again, you're dealing with the unifying of spirits within yourselves. And in order for you to unify those spirits, you first have to acknowledge and recognize the diverse characteristics and shades of each one of those spirits in order for us to unify them. You think about the Orisha. Well, who or what is the unifier of the Orisha? It's the Ori. The Ori is the chief of the Orisha. You could read so many stories about that. It tells you. Now we have Orishanla, who's Obatala, who's an emanation, and Obatala Orishanla is the most exalted Orisha, by name. When you see that Anla or Inla, like Babanla or Iyanla, it's revered or most highest or greatest, So we understand the supremacy and the hierarchical stratus that even exists within the Orisha families. Not all Orisha are created equal, we could say, right? But I've explained that whole Obatala, Oduduwa, and Orumila not being Orishas before. People still have trouble with that, but it's just because they don't know. They've never studied. Someone told them that, and that's it. There was no psychoanalytics that went on. There was no philosophical research. There was no intellectual research. It just becomes a religion for so many people. And you can't unify various consciousness underneath the banner of religion. It doesn't work. Now, of course, certain experiences that we may have from a spiritual perspective are meant to stay within a primal and instinctual place. Because when you do try to intellectualize some things, you miss the point of it, because they're crucial and integrative to our liberty. We're living out these sciences. We're living out these spirits. So some things you're not going to be able to intellectualize away, but through direct apprehension, through dreams, through intuition, many other things will come to you, and those are valid sources. Those are valid sources. To think that all intellectualism comes from a book is insane. Your intellectualism also comes to your ability to apprehend. And I'm not speaking about the New Age theory of enlightenment. Like, that's something different. Because sometimes what that creates is this sense that I can figure out all things within the confines and boundaries of my own psyche. And that goes back again to what I spoke about earlier about you're not going to be able to find everything you need from one source. And only a child would think something like that, because a lot of times, again, just sometimes the stubbornness of a child. So when you say something like that to people, you have to be careful, because they'll say, oh, well, then I just need to meditate. And that's an excuse for them to stay sick. I got to listen to my own thoughts, because a lot of times I listen to my own thoughts, I'm right. A lot of times you're not right. A lot of times your thoughts are corrupted, just like your intuition is corrupted, just like the spirits that are inside of you are corruption. So you need someone who is not corrupted to help you out. That's why we have this energy we know as Obatala, chief of the resurrection, chief of the white claw, the uncorrupted one. Because you need someone who's not tainted with the same illnesses that you may be suffering from to give you that guidance and give you that direction. That becomes so hard a lot of times. Sometimes we as individuals, we have some difficulty accepting how broken this society has made us, how deeply rooted our pain and sicknesses are, how deeply rooted the complexities of our dysfunctional neuroses are. We have such trouble accepting that. Like, America gave you garbage. Western society gave you garbage. And you took it, and you ate it, and you watched it, and you wore it, and you spoke it, and you lived it. You became it. You lusted for it, for the American dream. And it was pure, toxic, venomous garbage. So now you have a pure, toxic, venomous mentality. So now when you start to come into something that's healthier and we're striving towards unity, you rail against it, because everything inside of you tells you, no, I got to do it the way I want to do it. I got to follow my thoughts. But that's where the value of ritual comes in. When you can become one with something that's more ancient and more untouched and more primal and more righteous than you are. And then you feel the influx of that power for a moment, and then you step outside of yourself and you realize just how insane you are. That's why so many people get involved in ancient African tradition and they quit. Can't tell you how many students I've had quit because I do the real stuff with you. You're going to do some real stuff. We're not going to sit here and play around with the kiddie stuff. We're going to do real activities. We're going to do real rituals. We're going to do real divination. We're going to tap into some real information. And then what happens immediately from working on those real systems, what happens immediately from doing that real work is that people get a moment to step outside of themselves, see the demons within themselves. And when they see the demons within themselves, they think that those are external spirits that are coming to attack them. They think those are external spirits that are now trying to take away their light or trying to derail them, without realizing you're just seeing what we've all been seeing. You're seeing the dirtiness, you're seeing the demons, you're seeing all the things that need to be exercised within your system. So sometimes the same process happens when we're looking to create unity, when we're looking to join with others and try to move towards some goal, some mission, whatever that mission may be. You know, sometimes we realize that when we're put into a position to do a certain thing, we start to realize what parts of our own internal mechanisms are broken. That's why I said it's not just enough to make the declaration of what you are, or the declaration of your unity, or the profession, because we first have to also acknowledge, are you coming in whole? That's why with our new spiritual training, phase 1, ministry to the self, because so many of us are deeply rooted we're deeply rooted inside of a sickness that's sprouting something very dirty for us. If we think about, look at the example of the lotus flower. It roots itself in the deep, dark recesses of the dark mud, and then it goes through the watery environment and comes out into the air. Well, imagine if it was rooted in sewage, right? Imagine if it was rooted in sewage, but somehow was able to still come out and look like a lotus. Now, what would happen if one were to dive in the waters of their own subconscious? Picture that water that the lotus stem is in, right? And the stem represents transcendence, just like the tree trunk represents transcendence. But, you know, let's say we descend. We go down that trunk, or we go down that lotus stem, and then we look down and say, whoa, you're rooted in sewage. This is why sometimes your color's a little funny, you know, in the petals. This is why you don't really reflect the sunlight like the other lotus here do. Okay, we need to uproot you and plant you into some cleaner soil. Well, what will we do? We'll fight. Because we feel like if you uproot me and transplant me, you're going to kill me. So no, I'd rather just stay in the sewage. Let me do my job, leave me alone, I'll just stay in the sewage. But the thing is, you can't do your job there. You can't do your job sick. Because whatever you bring forth is only going to be an expression of that sewage. You know, when that lotus is exhaling its oxygen into the environment, what is it exhaling? Sewage. Sewage-filled oxygen. So everything that you touch, everything that you breathe the breath of life upon becomes a toxic breath of life. It is through your exhaling that you give life to things. It is through your exhaling that you create even spirits in physical form. You first create them through thought form. And then when you speak them, they become real. Well, what if going back in your rootage, you find that even your thoughts are rooted in something toxic? So what are you creating? Toxic spirits. And they'll be reflected in all the toxic relationships around you. You can believe that. So unification first requires a self-analysis. And through that self-analysis, we're able to see exactly where we're at. But through ritual, we have a subjective analysis that we go through. And we first process and we synthesize what the actual ritual is, why we began the ritual, what we're actually doing. That's where it begins at. Okay, and then as we go through the process, when the ritual begins to separate us from our toxic selves, right? Because that's when we start to transcend. We go into our higher selves through ritual. And then we can look and say, How do I look? I look bad, I look good, what's going on here? And then there's also, that's where the self-esteem comes in, because we or the balance between self-esteem and self-disgust. We may look at our human forms and be disgusted, but through the transcendence into our higher forms, esteem is built, because we realize, oh, wait a minute, I am not the human form. Okay, the human form is a vehicle. Now I got to take care of my vehicle. My vehicle's looking kind of raggedy, and because the vehicle is raggedy, I'm coming into situations smoking and polluting them up because the vehicle is raggedy. It's like driving a hoopty, and the hoopty may have issues with its catalytic converter, or the rings may be bad, so it's blowing out white smoke. So anytime you go into a situation where you got to join with other people, you smoking the place up. Everybody's coughing, and you notice everywhere you go, you're the common denominator that brings discord and calamity, because your vehicle is raggedy. So when you do ritual, you have an opportunity to separate from the vehicle and see what it really is. So unification, it's a process. Again, to reiterate, it's not a declaration, it's a process. And so much begins with the acknowledgement of your word and your intent of why you originally want to unify to begin with, because that will determine what organism you should be a part of. If the entire collective consciousness of humanity, if the outcome is death, or if the desire is death, then that means we can all function within the same organization to establish unity. If some, they understand that the end result of this ritual of life is death, but others understand that the end result of this ritual of life is immortality through cybernetics. Let's say they're creating robots and nanotechnology to extend their lives. Then we wouldn't be able to unify with those individuals, because we're performing a different ritual with a different intent. So you have to find those who have your intent. For our new, we establish factions and components, and when we tell people, hey, come fill out the form, it's so that we can build a movement where people can become whole again. And through people becoming whole again, they can share that wholeness with one another. They can share that wholeness with people they love and people they don't love, and we can stop damaging each other further, like scared, broken animals. When another animal comes near it, what does it do? It lashes out. Like they say, hurt people hurt people. That's true to a degree, you see. So now if everyone is focused on that, then your diversity finds its place within that. It settles in somewhere. But some will come in just because of what they want personally. I've experienced that heavily in building over the years. A lot of people say, yeah, brother, I want to build. But it's really because they just want something. They want it to benefit them, and they figure if they get closer to me or closer to the leadership, that they'll get more benefit. But they're quickly filtered and screened out. Quickly. Because that doesn't create unity, because we have our intention towards our end goal is different. Now our methods and our rituals for getting to that end goal, no matter the similarity of said ritual, it's going to be different, because each individual synthesizes at their own level and at their own perspective. Something just to remember. They synthesize at their own level and their own perspective, and when one becomes one with the ritual, one separates themselves from themselves and is able to see that they can face the darkness. They can see their true reflection. That's the science of the twins, like the Marasa, like the Ibeje. It's facing the darkness, seeing what you really are, aside from what you think you're projecting. And then it gives you an opportunity to make a decision. Do I want to continue to be that which is disgusting, or do I want to continue to be that which holds esteem? Well, this has been our Chief Speaks. I know I've covered a lot in regards to unity, and I just will that you pick and pull, go back and listen, take it all, and that you get something from it all in regards to unity and why unity becomes so important. Unity is valued, and unity is important because it is the end result of the ritual of life. So if we can mirror that same unity on a microcosmic level with whatever it is that we're doing, then we die a better death. Because no matter what, we're going back to the one. We're all going back to the one, which is that umoja unity. So how do you want to go back? Do you want to go back raggedy and broken? Which means, of course, you part of your soul incarnates into the raggedy heaven, and then part of you has to come back. Or do you want to go forward with a polished and refined, alchemicalized consciousness intact? Willfully, it's the latter. Okay, so just make sure you guys tune in this Tuesday and Thursday, 1 to 3 p.m. Community radio. You can share your thoughts on the shows or thoughts on whatever. It's an open forum time for those of you who have questions too. It's a quicker and easier way to get your questions answered, as opposed sometimes to even sending in emails. Also, next Sunday will be the open student panel forum, quote unquote. Anyone can call in, and share your thoughts and ideas on this month's shows, or if you have questions as to things that were said that you may not still have been able to process. Remember, again, we learn collectively in groups. That is our way. This single, isolated myth of learning has never been us, ever. We've always learned in groups. All right, so keep that in mind. But certainly, we have the end of the month time when some of our students call in and they share, and they answer questions. And last month was pretty good share. Last month people got a lot out of it, man. So I definitely advise you guys to tune into that and be a part of that experience, right? So that has been our segment, This Chief Speaks, and I want to thank you all for tuning in, and be on the lookout. The book is on its way. I'm almost there. I just got to transition some people. Birthing rites, naming ceremonies, funerary rites, rites of passage, which all of those are anyway. That is still a very active part of what I do as a Jegna, aside from the teachings. I try to squeeze in these videos and this audio in between everything else. So that's why often you'll see me in so many different environments as I'm speaking. Sometimes I'm doing them on the go. So yeah, just the works are coming. The works are coming forth. But until such time, enjoy what has been put forth for you. Utilize it. If you're not a member of our New Life Global Ministries, come on and join up. We definitely could use some contributors. And I'm not just talking about financially. I'm speaking about people who can help with the social media, people who can help with the shows. We also have the Africa Initiative, so work with that, and we have also some other physical communal retreat initiatives as well that we're working on. So I know a lot of people, when they look to sign up, they're looking for what they're going to get, and they're looking for the support they're going to get. But you get by giving. You stimulate the sacred cycle of reciprocity from either side. If you want more, give more. If you want to give more, receive more. It's a cyclical thing. You can't just always push from one side or take from one side, because if it comes this way, it's got to go around back that way. So you can stimulate it from various sides. Very similar to what I tell my students, you learn best by teaching. Teaching is an act of giving. And when you're teaching and dealing with certain issues that students may come with, you see the growth. Look at the students who have consistently participated in the end of the month panel. You can hear the growth if you listen to the first time they did it, up and even to the last time. You hear that the leaps and bounds that they're making in their growth and their evolution in this Anu progression. All right, so I definitely invite you all to come and support. But until such time, I am Chief Jegna Haru Yuya Asand Anu, and this has been Chief Speaks. Thank you all for tuning in. I will see you all very soon.
Anu Nation is home to the Anu spiritual order founded by Chief Jegna Haru Yuya Asand Anu. Some of the components of Anu Nation are Anu Life Global Ministries, Enlightenment and Transformation, Sadulu House, and Osiris Life Spiritual Services. SaduluHouse.com is the school component of Anu Nation, where spiritual empowerment through education and training is emphasized. One way that is accomplished is through our monthly webinars. Our webinars are packed with foundational information, rituals, and live instruction to empower your spiritual work. At SaduluHouse.com, you can view our diverse list of topics for this year that range from meditation to sex magic. And you can also register for any of the webinars at your convenience, sign up for our introductory Orisha class, schedule a spiritual reading, and sign up for the Anu Spiritual Training course. Enlightenment and Transformation is the media component of Anu Nation. Here, you can view all of our archived shows from over the years to our current segments. They include Chief Speaks, Masterminds Monday, Anu Asafo, Thunderground Thursdays, and Foundational Fridays. You can also visit us on our YouTube channels. They are Enlightenment and Transformation, Orisha Yoruba, and Anu Nation. Osiris Life Spiritual Services is for those who are ready to take the necessary actions to bring your life into holistic balance. Here we offer consistent monthly one-on-one coaching, solutions that are tailored just for you, practical hands-on self-development techniques that will accompany your monthly readings, and customized practical strategies designed for you that guarantee positive results. Simply choose the package that best fits your needs. And last but not least, alphaomegastore.com. The Alpha Omega Store is our online botanica where we offer divination tools, herbs and incense, DVDs, books, and other hard-to-find ritual items. You can also get our best-selling foundational book, Grasping the Root of Divine Power. Other great works from Anu Nation are Shrine and Altar, Solutions for Dysfunctional Family Relationships, and Natural Hair for Young Women. All great books to assist you on your journey. To find out more on how to get involved with Anu Nation, visit our websites and YouTube channels and be sure to sign up for our monthly newsletter.